Arya's retconned Dagger, an abandoned $30 million pilot, and the kiss that wasn't in the script. Here are all the small-screen secrets from the first 2 seasons of House of the Dragon. The abandoned $30 million prequel pilot. Before House of the Dragon was officially on HBO's slate, HBO made a completely different Game of Thrones prequel, and you've never seen a frame of it. Bloodmoon, sometimes called The Long Night, was a roughly $30 million pilot starring Naomi Watts, set thousands of years before Aegon's conquest. Jane Goldman wrote it, S.J. Clarkson directed it, and it took place in the Age of Heroes. No Targaryens, no King's Landing, and no dragons. The pilot was finished in 2019, and then HBO watched it. The then Warner Media chairman Bob Greenblatt said it didn't deliver on the promise of the original series. Within hours of canceling Bloodmoon, HBO greenlit House of the Dragon straight to series. No pilot this time around. 10 episodes guaranteed. The Bloodmoon pilot has been locked away ever since. Even George R.R. Martin says he's never even seen the finished cut. The green finger glitch. One of House of the Dragon's most famous mistakes was brief, but impossible to miss once you spotted it. In Episode 3, when Viserys hands over a letter, Paddy Considine's left hand can clearly be seen wearing a bright green glove over 2 fingers. The glove was meant to help the team digitally remove those fingers in post-production, showing Viserys' worsening physical decay. Instead, the markers made it all the way into the finished episode. This is a very modern kind of blooper. Not like Daenerys' coffee cup left on set, but a digital amputation that never got finished. HBO later patched the shot on streaming, which means some viewers saw the mistake and later viewers never will. The real Iron Throne. One thing House of the Dragon deliberately fixed was the Iron Throne itself. George R.R. Martin had long said the original Game of Thrones version was too small and too tidy, so the prequel went bigger, messier, and more dangerous. The new throne was built from 2,500 hand-cast swords, creating something that feels less like a chair and more like a jagged metal landslide. A health and safety nightmare that actually made the actors genuinely nervous. It's much closer to the throne Martin always described. Ugly, sprawling, and actively uncomfortable. A throne a king should never sit easy on. The recycled blades. But not all of those 2,500 blades were forged for House of the Dragon. To bulk out the throne and its staircase, the production borrowed weapons from other major fantasy productions, reportedly the 2016 Warcraft movie and Netflix's Witcher. So the new Iron Throne is literally built from the weapons of rival franchises. Aegon melted the swords of defeated enemies into his throne. HBO's props department did the same with the props of competing series. 2 Rhaenyras never to meet. To make the season's biggest casting handover feel natural, the showrunners decided that the actors playing the same character should not meet at all. Millie Alcock and Emma Darcy, who play younger and older Rhaenyra, both wanted to sit down together to talk through the character's progression with director Miguel Sapochnik. Sapochnik refused. He wanted them to trust that they each had their own version and was apparently worried that any meeting would lead to one of them mimicking the other. The same rule was supposed to apply to Emily Carey and Olivia Cooke, the 2 Alicents. Cooke later admitted she never got the memo and had been quite happily chatting to Carey on set the whole time. As a result, we got a recasting that feels like a 10-year time jump in motion. Rhaenyra and Alicent have changed because the world has weighed on them, not because the new actors are doing impressions of the old ones. The Concorde and the Flying Greyhound. Each dragon in House of the Dragon was designed with its own identity in mind. In Syrax's case, that meant Concorde, the retired supersonic airliner. According to the VFX team, Rhaenyra's dragon was inspired in part by its sleek head and streamlined profile, helping define Syrax as elegant and fast rather than huge and brutal. Older dragons like Vhagar feel ancient and heavy, but Syrax was designed to feel smooth, refined, and aerodynamic, which then informed her movements and mannerisms. In other words, the dragons were given different design logic. In Syrax's case, less monster, more prestige aircraft. Meanwhile, if you ever thought Caraxes moved like a different species entirely, you were right. To animate Daemon's dragon, the team took their inspiration from greyhounds, specifically the awkward way they sit, rest, and hold themselves. That helped give Caraxes the strange, twitchy, elongated body language. It's kind of perfect because it also describes Daemon. Caraxes doesn't move like a noble beast. He moves like a neurotic weapon of mass destruction. Less majestic lizard, more nightmare racing dog with wings. And if you're enjoying this video, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss our Season 2 breakdown. The time-traveling nobleman. Jefferson Hall has pulled off one of the oddest achievements in HBO's Westeros universe. He has played 3 different named characters. First, back in Game of Thrones, he briefly showed up as Sir Hugh of the Vale in Season 1, and was promptly turned into a cautionary tale by the Mountain. Then House of the Dragon brought him back and gave him not one role, but two, Jason and Tywin Lannister. Basically, Hall is so good at playing smug nobleman, he got asked to do it 3 times, which, when you say it out loud, doesn't really sound like a compliment. The Crown Moment. One of the best moments in Season 1 was not planned at all. In Episode 8, when Viserys struggles toward the Iron Throne, his crown accidentally fell off during filming. Instead of breaking the scene, Matt Smith, staying in character, instinctively picked it up and placed it back on Paddy Considine's head. Director Geeta Patel realized immediately that the unscripted moment was stronger than anything they had planned. Daemon spends the season circling the crown, craving it, resenting it, and being shaped by it. So the moment when he quietly returns it to his brother lands harder than any speech could have. It tells you, in about 2 seconds, that for all Daemon's chaos, his loyalty to Viserys was real. Rhaenyra's stylish burden. Rhaenyra's heir ceremony outfit in the first episode of the series was not just designed to look impressive, it was designed to be heavy. Costume designer Janny Tamime drew inspiration from Moroccan bridal wear for the look, especially in the jewelry and headpiece, helping make the ceremony feel ancient and ornate, a far cry from the more rugged leather and fur vibe of Game of Thrones. She also made the golden cape that Supergirl Millie Alcock had to wear physically heavy. It's exactly the kind of symbolism this show loves. Rhaenyra is being publicly elevated, glorified, and dressed like the future of the dynasty, but you can actually see that she is being physically weighed down by that burden in real time. The stunt that left a mark. The epic eye for an eye fight in Episode 7 was carefully choreographed, but the young actor still walked away with real injuries. Leo Ashton, who plays young Aemond, revealed that his hip was actually broken during the shoot, half joking that it made him as tough as his character. The cast filmed the sequence over several days with 5 child actors going at each other in tightly blocked routines, and Ashton has said that they were wiped out even on the first day, exhausted before any of the fighting had been filmed. What we see on screen as a chaotic 4-on-1 brawl is mostly precise stunt work, but some of the panic, the shoves, the way Aemond keeps stubbornly getting back up, might just carry something you can only get from kids running on adrenaline who've already been at it for days. Faking melees at the coronation. For all the real extras and giant physical sets in Aegon's coronation, the biggest moment was mostly digital. Rhaenys bursting through the floor on Meleys couldn't be done practically for obvious reasons. Mainly that dropping huge amounts of debris onto hundreds of extras is frowned upon these days. So the entire sequence was shot on a 360-degree blue screen. Roughly 40 real extras stood in the foreground. The crowd, the destruction, and Meleys herself were built afterwards. Eve Best filmed her Dragonback scenes completely separately, with director Claire Kilner narrating the carnage off-screen until she went hoarse. It's a great example of how these giant fantasy scenes really work. The painted table really glowed. The painted table in the finale didn't just get a digital glow-up in post-production, it actually glowed for real. To create that effect, the production built a rolling tray underneath the table and filled it with real candles, so the firelight would shine up through the map of Westeros, which means the warm, flickering light you see on the actors' faces was not some digital enhancement added later. It was really there on set, so when the firelight dances across the actors' faces in the finale, that flicker isn't a post-production pass. It's real flame, on a real prop. New school show, old school trick. But going old school had unintended consequences. Because the candles, torches, and braziers across the indoor sets were nearly all real rather than LED, the smoke and heat haze gradually became part of the visual texture of the series, especially in those tense indoor scenes where everyone looks overheated and on the verge of snapping. Honestly, it works well for this story. The court already feels like a pressure cooker. It just turns out the set sometimes was one too. Driftmark in real life. The exterior of High Tide, the seat of House Velaryon on Driftmark, isn't digital. It's a real castle. The production filmed on St. Michael's Mount, a tidal island off the coast of Cornwall in England. Twice a day the sea covers and uncovers the causeway connecting the island to the mainland, exactly like the dramatic bridge approach to Driftmark. So, the wide silhouettes, the slow horseback rides up to high tide, the funeral procession, all real. The only major addition is the digital extension that gives the castle its imposing Valyrian profile. The same coastline did double duty elsewhere. Nearby Holywell Beach and Kynance Cove served as the stepstones, where Daemon battled the crab feeder. Good for fans to know, St. Michael's Mount is fully open to visitors, so it's one of the easiest pieces of Westeros to visit in real life. Twice a day anyway. The Retconned Dagger. House of the Dragon took one of the most famous props from Game of Thrones and gave it a much bigger job. The Catspaw dagger made its first on-screen appearance as the blade used in Bran's assassination attempt in Season 1 of Game of Thrones, before eventually finding its way into the Night King's torso, courtesy of Arya. Here, though, it is reintroduced as a Targaryen relic carrying Aegon's prophecy. When heated, the Valyrian steel reveals a hidden inscription about the prince that was promised and the Song of Ice and Fire. So the dagger is a sacred family object tied to the survival of the realm. This makes its use later in the season even more ironic, because the same blade that is supposed to symbolize Targaryen duty and unity ends up being used by two of the houses squabbling over the tattered remnants of the Targaryen dynasty. Helaena the Dreamer. One of the changes House of the Dragon made to the source material was turning Helaena into a true dreamer. In the Fire and Blood book, she is a far quieter and less defined presence. In Season 1, however, her strange little mutterings become the most important lines in the entire season. When Aemond complains that he has no dragon, Helaena softly says, "He'll have to close an eye," a line that only reveals its full meaning later, when he claims Vhagar and loses his left eye in the process. The same pattern appears again in episodes 8 and 9 with The Beast Beneath the Boards, which foreshadows Meleys erupting through the floor of the dragon pit during Aegon's coronation. What makes this detail especially powerful is who fails to notice it. Viserys is consumed by prophecy on the grandest possible scale, yet never seems to recognize that his own daughter is quietly foretelling disaster in the next room, so Helaena becomes a living example of one of the show's central ideas. History tends to announce itself long before anyone bothers to listen. And if you want to see a deep dive into Helena's prophecies, make sure to hit subscribe. Syrax the Swiftie. Not all of the show's clever listening is in the script. Some of it is in the sound mix itself. Sound designer Paula Fairfield, 3 Emmys and a BAFTA for Game of Thrones universe work, gave each dragon a distinctive voice by first assigning them a human personality in her head. Caraxes, Daemon's blood-red dragon, is a white boy who thinks he can rap. Syrax, Rhaenyra's gold, is a fidgety 13-year-old Taylor Swift fan. Really? While it may sound kooky, these characters form the foundation of the actual sound design. So Caraxes gets noises that are jagged, twitchy, and performative. Syrax gets ones that are bright, restless, and self-conscious. But what about Vhagar? Aemond's mount gets the strangest treatment of all. To build the voice of the oldest dragon in the show, Fairfield reached for human infant noises, because, as she told Variety, Vhagar's key traits are tired, cranky, and IBS. Layered with conventional roars, the babies create a sound that feels huge, exhausted, and horrifying all at once. And that's what makes it work. Vhagar isn't supposed to sound like a clean fantasy beast roaring on command. She's supposed to sound ancient, strained, and unpredictable. Less noble war machine, more living apocalypse with joint pain. "I will sit the throne today." Viserys' famous line,
"I will sit the throne today,"
hit so hard partly because Paddy Considine was fighting the role physically as well as emotionally. By episode 8, the prosthetics used to depict Viserys' decay took roughly 4.5 hours to apply, designed by Barry Gower, who would later create the clickers for The Last of Us. The wet, strained, difficult texture in his voice was not a post-production trick. It came from the sheer amount of makeup Considine was performing through in real time. Viserys is not just emotionally summoning the last of his strength. The actor is also battling the costume, the makeup, and the physical restriction of the role. The Hidden Family Tree. The opening credits of House of the Dragon are not just decorative blood and machinery. They are a mechanical Targaryen family tree. As blood flows through the model of Old Valyria, it passes through sigils representing key members of the dynasty. Some are fairly easy to decode once you know what to look for. A blue sapphire points to Aemond, referencing the gemstone he later wears in place of his missing eye. A spider sigil represents Helaena, tying directly into her fascination with bugs and her dreamer-like mutterings. A wine goblet shaped like a naked woman represents Aegon, a perhaps mocking emblem for the future king that fits his hedonism. And alongside all of that is the visual merging of Targaryen and Hightower blood, reinforcing the dynastic fusion that drives the entire conflict. But the most intriguing details are the ones that hint at people not fully present in Season 1. A small cup hidden below Alicent's line has often been read as a reference to Daemon Targaryen, while a possible third sigil branching from Aegon and Helaena has led some viewers to speculate about Maelor as well. As with Game of Thrones before it, House of the Dragon's credits don't just set the mood, they quietly reveal the story. And make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see full family trees for all the main houses of Westeros. The widescreen treatment. A filming choice that separates House of the Dragon from Game of Thrones is the frame itself. While the original series stuck with a standard TV aspect ratio, House of the Dragon switched to a wider 2:1 format, though even that was a compromise. Showrunner Miguel Sapochnik and pilot DP Fabian Wagner originally wanted to go all the way to 2.4:1, the full cinema widescreen ratio used by most modern feature films. HBO pushed back, feeling it was a step too far for premium TV. So Sapochnik and Wagner did something cheeky. They framed for 2.4:1 anyway on early shoots, protecting the wider ratio in case the studio relented, which it never did. Still, 2:1, the same ratio used by Foundation and The Last of Us, definitely works. It gives the show a more cinematic look, ideal for long banquet tables and dragons cutting across the sky. And some seriously awkward family dinners. Now to Season 2, which brought more drama and more dragons. The rebooted opening credits. Season 2 threw the Season 1 opening credits out and started again. Instead of the Blood and Gears family tree, we now get a medieval tapestry, embroidered with key moments from Targaryen history. If you freeze frame it, you can spot everything from Daenys the Dreamer foreseeing the doom of Valyria, to Aegon's conquest, Harrenhal burning, the Great Council of 101 AC, and the eventual split between the Greens and the Blacks. And the clever part is that the tapestry keeps updating as the season unfolds. New atrocities get woven in. By the finale, dragons are looming over Dragonstone itself, which means the credits are showing history being made in real time. This wasn't a generic medieval reference either. Ryan Condal used the Bayeux Tapestry as inspiration, the 230-foot embroidered cloth from the 11th century that depicts the Norman conquest of England ending with the Battle of Hastings. And yes, William the Conqueror was an obvious template for Aegon the Conqueror. The butterfly effect. One of the most dramatic moments from House of the Dragon Season 2 didn't happen on screen. It happened on George R.R. Martin's blog. In a now-deleted post, the creator of the franchise fired a rare broadside at the show, criticizing the decision to cut Prince Maelor, Aegon and Helena's youngest son, out of the blood and cheese sequence entirely. Martin argued that this wasn't a minor tweak, it was a butterfly effect, a small change with cascading consequences. In his view, removing Maelor undercuts both Helena's later tragic arc and the eventual public uprising in King's Landing that grows out of it. It is a rare moment of the original author publicly arguing with his own adaptation, and a reminder that the show and the books are now telling two slightly different versions of the same war. The Sir Crispin Backlash. The fan hatred for Sir Criston Cole became so overwhelming that, by the Season 2 premiere, it had spilled directly into the real world. Following the premiere, Fabien Frankel was forced to limit and at points turn off comments on his Instagram entirely after a barrage of insults and even threats arrived from fans who couldn't separate the actor from the character. The harassment quickly became a talking point for the rest of the cast. Matt Smith and Millie Alcock both publicly defended Frankel, pointing out the level of hate was actually a testament to how effectively he was playing the most divisive man in Westeros. Online, fans began calling him Sir Crispin as a kind of derogatory shorthand. Frankel eventually leaned into it himself, posting a cheeky Instagram story alongside the actors who play the Tittenser twins, a quiet way of showing he was staying positive in the middle of all of it. If you ever needed proof that your performance is convincing, the audience hates you for crimes that aren't real, is probably it. Daenerys' dragon eggs get an origin story. Season 2 drops one of the biggest franchise connections yet. The dragon eggs Rhaenyra sends away with Rhaena are the same eggs that will one day be hatched by Daenerys Targaryen. In Episode 3, Rhaenyra sends her younger sons toward the Vale for safety, with Rhaena escorting them, along with 4 dragon eggs as part of the escape plan. The in-world implication is that the eggs continue east from there, eventually reaching Pentos, where they will later fall into the hands of Illyrio Mopatis, the same man who gives 3 petrified dragon eggs to Daenerys in the Game of Thrones pilot. Director Geeta Vasant Patel made the connection explicit, saying, "Those are Daenerys' eggs." That makes it a huge piece of retroactive myth-making. In the middle of a civil war that is wiping dragons out, House of the Dragon offers a glimpse of the eggs that will eventually bring them back. The only wrinkle is that the showrunner himself left room for interpretation. After Patel's comment, co-creator Ryan Condal said he prefers to think of them as one possible future, rather than a locked piece of canon. The Conqueror's armor. When Aegon rides into battle, he's not just wearing normal armor, he is wearing a statement. His gear is designed to evoke the armor of Aegon the Conqueror himself, complete with that severe ancestral Targaryen look. Aegon is trying to wrap himself in the imagery of the dynasty's greatest king, as if putting on the costume might help him inherit the authority too. This tells us exactly how Aegon sees himself, or at least how desperately he wants to be seen. And the backstory behind the armor is even better. The full Conqueror-inspired suit took the costume team 24 weeks to build. There is no description of Aegon wearing Valyrian steel armor anywhere in Fire and Blood, so the whole thing was invented for the series, with Condell presenting it as an heirloom passed down from old Valyria. It also brings one of the most arrogant lines in the season. As servants strap him into the armor, Aegon declares, "I was given the Conqueror's name and his crown, so I shall wear his armor to war." By the next episode, that 24-week suit is melted into his skin. The rotting Ratcatchers. One of Season 2's grimmest background details is also one of its smartest. After Aegon has the Ratcatchers hanged following Blood and Cheese in Episode 2, their bodies are left on display outside the Red Keep, and the show does not forget about them. As the episodes go on, those corpses keep visibly decaying, from fresh bodies to withering remains to hanging skeletons. The Ratcatchers do not just mark Aegon's rage, they become a quiet reflection of his reign, brutal, ugly, and steadily rotting in public view. Sir Gawain Hightower rebooted. Season 2 brings back a character most viewers probably didn't even realize they had seen before: Sir Gawain Hightower. Back in the Season 1 premiere, during Viserys' heirs tournament, Gawain was the Hightower knight Daemon rather casually humiliated. At the time, Gawain was little more than a background noble with a famous surname, but in Season 2, he returns properly, now played by Freddie Fox and riding at the head of the Green's forces as Alicent's older brother. There's something satisfying about showrunners going back and upgrading him, and it adds a nice layer to the war. Alicent is no longer just sending banners and allies into danger. Her own family is now out there in the field. The full burn rule. One of the most terrifying behind-the-scenes details from House of the Dragon is also one most viewers would never even consider. Showrunner Ryan Condell revealed that when a stunt performer does a full-body burn, they cannot take even a tiny breath. If they inhale, the fire can follow the air into the lungs. Condell called the stunt team the real heroes of House of the Dragon, and for good reason. In the Season 2 battle scenes, the production had as many as 16 performers fully on fire at once. This is a reminder that for all the dragons and digital spectacle, the most shocking moments are still brutally practical. Buried explosives. For the Battle of Rook's Rest, the production wanted the ground battle to feel as real as possible. So instead of asking hundreds of extras to pretend dragonfire was hitting around them, the crew buried explosives in the earth and detonated them remotely during takes. That way, when fire and dirt erupted across the battlefield, the actors and stunt performers' terrified reactions were very real. An extra bit of fun trivia: the location was the peaceful Bourne Woods, the same iconic filming location where Ridley Scott famously unleashed hell for the opening of Gladiator. These woods in the county of Surrey were turned into a scorched earth war zone. Rhaenyra's crown is too big for her. The show deliberately left Viserys' crown unchanged when it passed to her, so it sits a little loose and awkward rather than looking perfectly fitted. It is a small costume choice that says a lot. Rhaenyra was named heir when she was still just a girl, and the oversized crown reflects this. She inherited a burden long before she was ready to carry it. The 5,400 frame oneer. One of Season 2's biggest technical achievements was the Dragonmont cave sequence with Vermithor in Episode 7. The scene is one of the most intense sequences of the season, featuring the sowing of the seeds, where Rhaenyra gathers Targaryen bastards to attempt to claim the riderless dragons. The shot was designed to feel like a single, continuous take, but behind the scenes it was actually a stitched-together composite built from more than 5,400 frames, which means the scene's smooth, relentless momentum was not the result of one impossible camera move, it was the result of a truly ridiculous amount of invisible digital stitching. Birds of Prey for Meleys versus Sunfyre. The most spectacular moment in the battle at Rook's Rest, Meleys and Sunfyre locked together, falling out of the sky in a tangled spiral, was reverse-engineered from real wildlife encounters. Director Alan Taylor revealed that he and the VFX team studied documentary footage of Birds of Prey for the choreography. He noticed something specific. When raptors feel their territory has been invaded, they will flip upside down and engage talons mid-air, becoming locked together in a screaming death spiral all the way to the ground. Whichever bird releases first loses the fight. Taylor lifted that exact behavior for Meleys and Sunfyre, so the two dragons grappling, twisting, then tumbling earthwards together is taken directly from real eagle and hawk combat tactics, then scaled up to the size of buildings. Take something true about animals, then make it 50 feet long and on fire. A nightmare first shoot. The very first thing House of the Dragon filmed for Season 2 wasn't a battle, a council meeting, or a dragon attack. It was Daemon's nightmare. Matt Smith's first assignment after getting back into costume was filming the Red Keep dream sequence, where he hallucinates himself decapitating young Rhaenyra. This is honestly a very on-brand way to kick off a season built around guilt, paranoia, and one man's increasingly haunted mental state. Harrenhal is really a Welsh quarry. For all its ghost story energy, the outside of Harrenhal in Season 2 is actually an unassuming slate quarry in North Wales. The production used Dinerwig Quarry for Harrenhal's exterior, while the interior Godswood was built at Leavesden Studios. Apparently the goal wasn't just to make Harrenhal look huge, but instead to make it feel actively hostile. Production designer Jim Clay described the place as something designed to be psychologically torturous for Daemon, which tracks, because every time he walks through it, he looks like he has not slept properly in weeks. And in a neat bit of regional symmetry, Dragonstone's exterior was filmed at another Welsh quarry nearby, meaning that two of Westeros' most cursed locations are, in real life, basically giant holes in Wales. Hugh Hammer's scream wasn't in the script. One of Season 2's most unforgettable dragon moments was not actually written that way. When Hugh Hammer approaches Vermithor in Episode 7, the scene called for something quieter and more restrained. But on the day, actor Kieran Bew made a different choice. Instead of holding back, he let out that huge, staring, "come on" scream right at the dragon. Director Lonnie Perister said the moment gave him chills, and suddenly the scene clicked. Hugh was not trying to soothe Vermithor. He was trying to prove himself to it. So instead of a timid man begging for acceptance, it became a tiny human squaring up to one of the largest dragons alive. The Rhaenyra-Miss Arya kiss was an on-set idea. One of Season 2's most discussed moments was not in the script at all. Episode 6 originally built the scene between Rhaenyra and Miss Arya to a much more ambiguous kind of intimacy, essentially a charged pause, then interruption. But Emma Darcy, feeling the scene demanded something clearer, discussed it with Sonoya Mizuno, and then brought the idea to Ryan Condal before filming. The result was the kiss. What makes it especially controversial is how this diverges from Fire and Blood. As Darcy has noted, the source text is written like a history, and histories have a habit of leaving women's emotional lives out of the record. The Bosu Ball Dragon Ride. One of Season 2's stranger filmmaking tricks involved a piece of gym equipment. To make dragon riding feel less rigid and more physical, the camera team experimented with putting operators on a Bosu balance trainer, a half-sphere used for exercise, so the camera would rock and sway unpredictably, like someone trying to stay mounted on a living creature in flight. At the same time, the production also used an upgraded mechanical buck riding rig, combining moving mechanical elements with volume screens to create more natural rider movement. So, for every epic dragon flight you see in Season 2, you have some poor seasick camera operator to thank. 2 weeks on the Bronco. For all the digital wizardry and volume LED screens around her, Rhaenys' last ride came down to one actor and a mechanical rig. Eve Best filmed the entire battle at Rook's rest sequence on the Buck for 2 solid weeks. Her own description: "I spent every day for about 2 weeks on the Bronco," she told Business Insider, "and we were doing all kinds of wild moves. At one point, it had to look like we were doing 360-degree turns, and they were having to simulate that somehow. A fortnight of being thrown around in a harness while wind machines blast at you and an LED ceiling pretends to be the sky. All for what is, on screen, a few minutes of actual flight. The peace and acceptance you read on her face when Meleys finally stops, the surrender of a rider who knows it is over, may have been impacted by the actress physically wrestling with Rhaenys' demise for 14 days straight. The assassins stand in hand. The blood and cheese sequence in the season opener was one of the darkest scenes the show has ever done, which meant the team had to be extremely careful with its youngest actors. One of the smartest tricks was also one of the simplest. When the assassin covers little Jaehaerys' mouth, the hand you see on screen does not belong to the actor playing the killer. It belongs to the actual father of young Jude Rock, who plays Jaehaerys. This meant that, even in the middle of unimaginable horror, Jude was still being handled by someone safe and familiar. The rest of the sequence was also carefully structured so that the worst violence happened off-camera, or was staged using dolls instead of the children themselves. Which is a good reminder that some of television's most disturbing moments are only possible thanks to some very responsible decisions behind the scenes. The Stark theme came back. While the war theme is the most conspicuous across the series, the very first scene of Season 2 quietly hits you with one of the most emotionally loaded pieces of music in the entire franchise. When Jace arrives in the North and meets Cregan Stark at the Wall, the series reintroduces the original House Stark theme from Game of Thrones. It is a small choice, but for longtime viewers, those notes are far more than just a theme now. They carry more than a decade of memory, loss, and accumulated Westeros trauma. So before Season 2 has even properly started, the score is already reminding you, this story is part of something much larger and much older. The Lost Ninth Episode. If Season 2 felt like it ended a bit early, you weren't imagining it. The season was originally ordered as 10 episodes, with the back half building toward a major climax, the Battle of the Gullet, a gigantic naval clash that reshapes the war in fire and blood. Alan Taylor was attached to direct that 9th episode, then HBO and Warner Bros. Discovery cut the order down to 8. Taylor's own description. It was a funny kerfuffle at the beginning because we were going to originally do 10 episodes and we cut it down to 8. I was going to do episode 9, so I had to jump around and find a new chair to sit in. The chair he ended up in was episode 4, The Red Dragon and the Gold, now considered the best episode of the season. This obviously explains why Season 2 felt like it was building towards something the season never got to deliver. The Battle of the Gullet is coming up soon in Season 3. Alan Taylor's Westeros track record. Before House of the Dragon, Taylor directed 7 episodes of the original Game of Thrones, including Baelor, the episode that beheads Ned Stark in Season 1, and Beyond the Wall, the Season 7 set piece where the Night King kills Viserion. Now in Season 2 of House of the Dragon, he is the director behind Rhaenys and Meleys' death at Rook's Rest, which means Taylor has now killed Ned Stark, a beloved dragon, and the queen who never was. His own assessment. My career has weirdly turned into this thing where I frequently murder people's favorite characters. So if Alan Taylor's name turns up in the directing credits for any future Westeros project, you should probably brace yourself. The Six-Fingered Hand. Some of the secrets in House of the Dragon aren't hidden in dialogue, they're hidden in the credits. Open up the Season 1 opening sequence, find the cog representing Aegon and Helena's eldest son Jaehaerys, and look closely at his sigil. 2 overlapping hands, and one of them has 6 fingers. If you've read Fire and Blood or watched Season 2, you know exactly why. Jaehaerys is the heir assassinated by the killers known as Blood and Cheese in one of the darkest moments in Targaryen history. The episode is harrowing, and his death is grim. The Six-Fingered Hand is a gruesome foreshadowing of that death, hidden in the title sequence from Episode 1 of Season 1, more than a year before the show actually depicts what it's referencing. It's visible in the Season 1 credits, every single episode. The kind of long-fuse foreshadowing that rewards obsessive viewers and quietly stuns the rest of us when we finally catch up. David Bowie and the Punk Dragon. In contrast to the majestic elder dragons of Westeros, Moondancer was designed to have a reckless, aggressive, and almost punk presence. By incorporating the erratic, snappy movements of bats and Komodo dragons, the production ensured she felt temperamentally distinct from ancient behemoths like Vhagar. Early designs even boasted a top speed of 150 miles per hour, though they eventually dialed that back a bit. The end result was a dragon that feels less like an ancient weapon and more like an over-caffeinated chaos machine. Meanwhile, the actual look of Moondancer came from an even stranger reference. Ryan Condal confirmed the brief he gave the design team for Moondancer was, and this is a direct quote, simply David Bowie. What came back was, in Condal's own words, this tiger-striped green punk rocker with a mohawk. Moondancer's slim build, the green and yellow stripe pattern, that crest of spines along her neck like a glam rock hairdo, every weird design choice on her suddenly clicks into place. Vhagar feels like an ancient war monument, Vermithor like a piece of geology, and Moondancer feels like Ziggy Stardust with wings. And that's all for House of the Dragon Season 2 secrets. Make sure to check out the channel for more House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones deep dives.